Before we begin, I must officially announce my title with Turtle Rock Studios, The Legend of Slaying on the John, for this beautiful clip here.
We're a team!
When you have time!
Well, the beta for Back 4 Blood has come and gone, and if you watched my review of the alpha from 8 months ago, you should come into this expecting me to cover certain things and see what was different from our first look at the franchise and now our double dip. If not, go check out my alpha review real quick, as I'll be talking about the progress Turtle Rock has made with the criticisms and feedback they received last year. I try to be thorough and unbiased in my opinions, as many are either quick to say I'm just being pessimistic and just should have fun and stop complaining, and others say this game is going to be absolute trash from the get-go. There are two extremes to how to view this game, but as someone who again spent too much of his life playing Left 4 Dead to the point that Left 4 Dead 2 means way more to me than most people would be comfortable with, and for the fact that Turtle Rock and their reviewers have started many of their promotions with "from the creators of Left 4 Dead," there are going to be comparisons to Left 4 Dead, and every content creator that will play this in the first few weeks and drop it to hop to another hype train for clicks, that will put somewhere in the title or thumbnail the words Left 4 Dead. I don't want this marketing to be disingenuous to people of my similar mindset, but because they created Left 4 Dead and had the hype of succeeding that legacy doesn't necessarily mean it is Left 4 Dead, especially with what we'll be going over today. There is plenty of effort, passion, hard work into many aspects of the graphics, settings, gunplay, voice acting, gameplay elements, and oh so much more that I enjoy. But a great fear for me, as discussed in my alpha review, is how will this game's longevity be for the general population and be one of those games that channels label as the downfall of blank, because I want to play this game for years to come and enjoy it. So let's get into it without me rambling anymore and discuss the Back 4 Blood beta review. Which I know the reason a lot of you are coming into this video today is to hear my opinions about the versus mode. I have a timestamp right here if you just want to skip straight to that. And keep in mind, this is not my most organized video I've ever made. This is just my total thoughts and opinions, uncondensed and really unfiltered. So yeah, keep that in mind as you're watching through this video. Starting off, instead of a menu system getting us into the modes and customizations we want, we get an explorable hub world where we can talk to survivors at Fort Hope, see how life is for 45 Havens here, and the best part, go outside to the gun range where every gun and attachment in the game is available to try out for yourself, and even kill your friends with said weapons, which probably is the best way to spend your time between matches. Super fun to whack someone with an axe or wait till they leave the safe area and snipe the living shit out of them immediately.
Alright, I need you to stand right there, alright?
Okay.
Besides being able to roam and explore instead of staring at a lobby, they're really the only redeeming qualities of this hub world. While it's cool, it's also gonna suck for people to have to load into this world before being able to connect and do other modes you want to do if you only have a short amount of time. Also, the unblinking dead eyes of every survivor there as they repeat mundane tasks is a bit too real and unreal for me because of those NPC faces.
Blink, motherfucker!
I'm glad you can just go into your menu and pick which mode you want though, instead of having to talk to specific people like in Destiny. But besides that, how is the campaign mode now in the beta? The campaign that came from the alpha of Evansburg gets a continuation for the rest of Act 1. Yeah, that was only the first half of this act, or technically campaign, making a total 8-part story for each series of events, adding 4 new chapters to explore. This time going through infested barns, abandoned neighborhoods, and leading to a tunnel system where a source of Ridden has been located. It's easy to get lost figuring out where to go, but the locations and flow isn't too bad. Although some chapters like Abandoned feel excessively long compared to others, it's still fun going through and seeing a change of scenery as you progress. Difficulties still restrict your amount of continues depending on the more difficult options you choose, which still not a big fan of that, especially since on Nightmare, special riddens like the Tall Boy spawn way too often and are way too bullet spongy just after leaving the safe room. My friends and I couldn't even leave the safe room as it was just non-stop infected and was just not fun.
Oh god.
Oh god.
You opened
They're
the
coming.
door?
They're in. They are in like Flynn.
They've spawned this many already.
Oh my god. Are we gonna be able to leave?
No.
Another one?
Dude,
Oh, there's an armored one there. Fuck.
The difficulty for Nightmare has just been spiked up a lot. Why was this difficulty ramped up so much? Especially since the limited continues BS is still here and you get a lot less for the harder difficulties. Corruption cards also return, but this time aren't as drastic in each alpha playthrough unless you're a Nightmare where there's a lot more and can get annoying. But it's going to let you know what will be appearing more frequently and at all in your chapter. I still think it ruins the surprise of what can happen in a chapter, but this is what they're going with and we're stuck with it. I'm glad we didn't see stuff like the Bruiser Swarm cards, but there were still plenty of Bruisers, and we're getting stuff like Fog cards that make it really annoying seeing what's in front of you. Difficulty and corruption cards aside, what's more interesting is the variety of unique level mechanics scattered throughout the 4 new chapters. Ridden Nest pretty much block your path, making you to follow red tentacled vines to find nodes to destroy summoning hordes each time. So it's fun for what it is, and really fun for lore buffs like me and Roanoke. Also, another interesting mechanic feature is at the end of the Death Toll-esque safe room where you have to make it safe by barricading the windows with wood, by picking it up and walling it off, kind of like a round of Call of Duty Zombies. It's neat and a fun way to shake up the safe room formula, as well as giving a different goal while a horde attacks. I'm all for variety in what you do with each level. However, the one thing I'm not a big fan of is the finale for Act 1. It really feels lackluster, and all it is putting shells into a howitzer to destroy the entrance to a tunnel and prevent more Ridden from flooding out from it. So, you rush to this very wide open looking area, but barely move around from your one solo objective? So what do you do here in this situation? Well, it's basically Dead Center's finale if the gas cans were all neatly packed together in 3 piles right near the Jimmy Gibbs. While it takes a lot longer to load the shells, fire them, and unload them versus just pouring gas in a car, it still feels just like barely doing anything adventurous with an ending to an entire act. Why not have the shells scattered around the map, making it more intense? Well, it's most likely due to the fact that the Special Ridden being so freaking bullet spongy in the midst of spawning tons of them in common infected for horde events and in general throughout the campaign, and in most cases, there's no way to prevent you from taking damage from them because they're so bullet spongy they are going to close the gap between you and them and do something to you. So with this all in mind, having the shells feet away from the howitzer was probably the least frustrating route possible, but also the least explorative. With that jab about the specials brings me to our next topic. So going into it, we talked about the playable Special Ridden of the Reeker, Tallboy, and Stalker before. They have all their same powers, and they have variations, quirks, and problems they had for the alpha that I'll discuss more in the Swarm/Versus part of the video. But for the unplayable Ridden, we have the Breaker, which seems like a faster tank, and the Hag, which seems like if given enough time can insta-kill you, if not taken down. But we didn't get to see them in action, and it does raise the question if certain special zombies will be restricted to specific acts and chapters, which, honestly, giving a bit more variety between each act isn't too bad of an idea. But we also have a surprise clinger in what is officially called the Sleeper, but I call it the Wall Baby.
MP5 and
there's
a
the baby.
Super 90
Aw.
shotgun.
Oh, it's not a baby, it's just half a man. A very interesting, weak Special Ridden clinging to walls that can die in one shot, but if you approach its vicinity and line of sight in any way, will instantly pin you down, causing tons of damage, and start tearing you open. It's a great mechanic to discourage people from running away from the group on their own, who aren't paying attention to their surroundings, which was a common problem in Left 4 Dead, and there is still no point to the Ogre. Except, wow, big boy ogre, wow. It still serves as a static threat you can easily avoid and sometimes get hit by if you get slowed down by commons, but overall, it's just really underwhelming. Why take the time to kill it with that giant health bar? It gives no reward unless we're going to be seeing a weekly challenge system in the future, giving you extra supply points if you kill it. But as a base game without all these shiny things thrown at it, the Ogre is just a waste of resources when you can just run to a door it can't reach through and be done with it. There needs to be something more than just a challenge thing. I mean, make it a Borderlands type event where killing the big boss drops rare loot. With that said, the common ridden aren't nearly as tiresome to kill as before, and I do appreciate the variety of commons from walkers to runners to armored zombies, and don't get me started on the acid zombies, those piss me off. Having much more distinct differences, with some looking like normal zombies, some having their heads covered in worms, or spikes protruding from their skulls, lending to the variety of the parasitic infection in the lore, so much more. I cannot wait to cover them in a profile and or why you would survive video. You know, I do wish the gore when killing them could be a bit more ramped up and be a bit more reminiscent to the gore mechanics of the Left 4 Dead engine that came out in 2009. As here, most of the time it's just blood splatters and occasional head, limb removal and some guts thrown in here and there. But what about the people sent to wipe these worm-ridden sons of bitches out? The cleaners themselves feel slightly more fleshed out and have a bit more dialogue, with random Ellis-like stories thrown in sometimes.
It was my family, my parents. I watched them die and did nothing. Worse, I ran.
We all ran back then. Hell, I'm still running.
One-liners that would make Marvel proud, but get old really quick on repeat playthroughs with their quirky stereotypes, and friendly fire incidents where people like Hoffman will say, "Hey man, it's okay, Evangelo, you're young, accidents happen."
You bloody shot me!
Sorry! Hey, Hoffman, whose side are you on?
While I could ask for a little more from the survivors, I mean cleaners, which I hate that title. It sounds like they're there to wipe people's asses themselves. I'd rather them just be called survivors. They are fine with what dialogue they have to say. Again, I just worry how they will go moving forward with unique interactions between each cleaner as we are introduced to more cleaners in future DLCs. Also, gotta say, Mama's gotta fix that mouth of hers. Looks like her cheeks melted and she's chewing on the bits like gum. And that Walker looks like he is suffering from low poly depression. The appearance of these people really don't make a difference gameplay-wise, especially in the beta, because that's just going to change. But you know what does? The issue of blood splatter all over the cleaners I brought up last time. Cleaners still get covered in blood to a comical degree and makes it difficult for players to discern who they are shooting in a sporadic environment, often leading to many friendly fire incidents because the cleaners look like zombies being so bathed in blood. Tone it down, Turtle Rock! Cleaners also having to deal with having trauma damage makes things more intense in campaign, but more often than not, it makes healing with medkits and bandages feel utterly useless, where trauma can only be healed by med stations and temporarily healed by pills, but honestly it just loses the element of strategy when it comes to your health in favor of having the game's RNG take control of your total health. Why? Pills temporarily heal past the trauma threshold, but medkits don't? Over time, in an 8-chapter campaign, that is brutally asinine to manage over 8 chapters. And if you don't have 400 copper sometimes, these healing stations will be out of the question, and you're gonna have to deal with having a maximum health of 40 in the middle of a chapter. But besides that, I'm looking forward to trying out the 3 other cleaners that we are not able to play yet, and see how their abilities shake things up and what lines they may have. The unique abilities of the cleaners aren't the biggest deal in lower difficulties, but can come into major play if you're playing something like Nightmare and Veteran. But, I mean, honestly, it's going to come down to us just picking the same survivors because some feel a lot underwhelming. Like Holly, you don't want to pick her on higher difficulties versus somebody like Hoffman, or like Evangelo since he can sprint away from commons. Also, throwing this in there, stamina isn't as bad of a problem as the Alpha was, and feels a bit more fair for when you sprint and swing your melee. Although sprinting causes obnoxious levels of asthmatic breathing from your character.
We were playing
Back 4 Blood.
Maybe turn down the volume for their breathing just a wee bit. We can tell when we are low on stamina by the on-screen indicator, as well as not being able to sprint and melee as efficiently. We don't really need half of your audio turning into ASMR. So what are we as cleaners looking to pick up as we progress through the levels to spice things up and fight back against the Ridden? So copper is still there. That was a very controversial thing when the alpha was released, but it's not as bad as the alpha. It still could be a little bit of an issue, but it's not as bad. While the alpha had it where copper and buying shit was a pain in the ass, things are cheaper and copper is relatively kind of more frequent, so it's not too bad of a mechanic if you ignore how spending copper on cards and boxes on the ground still doesn't make sense. Whoa. Sweet, 10% extra ammo, fuck yeah! It's cool that you can choose what supplies you want for a given chapter and can effectively strategize more as you go. Challenges during the chapter, like not starting any alarms or no one going down, also incentivizes different playstyles and rewards the players with extra copper that I'm completely behind. I like a little extra challenge and goals. During the alpha, a big pain was just getting guns in the first place at the start of your playthrough, either struggling to buy a good weapon from the first box or sticking to only your secondary and hoping you find a primary weapon as you progress. From alpha to beta, the developers actually listened, and at the start of each campaign, there are now 4 guns for each survivor to pick up instead of forcing players to not waste all their copper on buying a gun or using a valuable slot in your card deck to have the gun you want. There is no gun card anymore. I am all for that. Which bringing me to another topic that was controversial. Cards are still around and they're not going anywhere. And they have way too big of a difference in usefulness, like either getting 10% more stamina versus being able to carry an extra grenade, healing item, or something else. There was an improvement from the alpha with the cards though, considering many cards originally had many downsides or negative effects. Like a majority of each card had some kind of detriment like get 20% more health, but you receive more damage, or your stamina regenerates faster, but your total stamina is lessened. They made every card except ones for you pick up mid-chapter mostly all just benefits to you and your team. A decent improvement for the card system and gives much more legroom for people to make bigger and better and more fun builds without sacrificing other aspects of their own gameplay and roles. Which you can work off of pre-built decks or make your own builds with cards you already have, or unlocking more in the Battle Pass. I mean the supply line system, where after each round of campaign or versus you get supply points you can spend. However, if you really want that really good card that's at the end of a supply line, you're going to have to buy a bunch of other useless sprays, emblems, banners, and cards that you're probably never going to use to get to it. Saying this straight up, barely anyone is going to use the sprays in this game, and the banners and emblems are just kind of lackluster, they're kind of cool to look at. So let's get all this crap nobody really wants and bury the stuff like cards and possible cosmetics with them to stretch the grind. Not a fan of how the supply system is set up, and I just wished we could just go up to a vendor and buy specific cards we want, but that's the business model and standard for online games now. It's okay to grind for cards that do change gameplay. I just wish all the filler stuff like sprays and backgrounds weren't all just so bland and boring. I just want to get the cards, man. Speaking of which, cards aren't totally necessary to actually use a melee weapon now. Melee no longer feels like a waste of time, most of the time, and actually can be used to slice and pound your way through hordes of Ridden, compared to previously when it could just mildly injure most of them, unless you invested most of your card loadout into melee builds. But it's still a major far cry away from the melee weapons of Left 4 Dead 2. Honestly, if they could make the weapons like the melee weapons used in Left 4 Dead 2, but give a cooldown and work off the stamina, that would be perfectly fine. But say a special Ridden rides up to you face to face, a melee weapon will not be useful in any way in taking them out, barely causing them any damage unless you have a hatchet or axe that does a lot more damage than the trademark weapon of Holly. Melee weapons are still kind of lackluster. Hatchets and axes are far superior in damage to the signature weapon of Holly, being the baseball bat that is honestly the worst performing melee. I hate seeing that thing and always throw it to the ground. What's the point of having it if it is trash? I mean, it's great melee weapons aren't as bad as they used to be, but it still feels like there should be more to them, and more often than not, I just use firearms as my secondaries, especially since if I'm gonna go down, I don't want a melee weapon because I'm stationary on the ground, and using a melee weapon is not gonna help my team in any way unless I ask the zombies to come closer to me. Now, the grenade slot has an issue in its assortment. The frag grenade still explodes on impact and insta-kills just about anything in its radius if you're not playing on a higher difficulty, and with Versus now out, it's kind of broken to just chuck a grenade at a Bruiser and call it a day. It's extremely unbalanced, and in Versus, we could just spec our cards into having 2 to 3 grenade slots and only looking for frags, and it makes carrying anything else a question of why the hell would I have a pipe bomb, flashbang molly, or firecrackers in Versus? The Molotov is still vastly underwhelming and just for minor chip damage on the Ridden, and doesn't feel as satisfying to use like the Molotovs of infected past. Firecrackers feel majorly useless, only feeling like half of a pipe bomb with longer duration. Pipe bombs still work functionally the same as Left 4 Dead, but with a lot less gore and flying body parts, and the Ridden just going limp instead. Razor Wire was a nice addition, being able to slow down the Ridden at doorways and choke points, and can make things more tactical and easier to work with, especially since a lot of Back 4 Blood scenarios force you into a condensed area that you'll repeatedly go to verbatim. But I do have to say there needs to be some kind of health or lifespan to their use, as Razor Wire never goes away, which in campaign, whatever, cool, permanent slowdown on zombies, but it kinda sucks in Versus since nothing can be done about this barbed wire, as a Ridden and being slowed down in only the 3 entry points of a bunkered down building can be a pain in the ass. You know what's also a pain in the ass? The attachment system for your firearms. It's cool we can get fast mags for our assault rifles, scopes for snipers, and more, but why can we not detach them on our own like we can drop any other items in our inventory? It sucks finding a light machine gun with tons of recoil and it having a damn 16 times sniper scope on it, basically making it so annoying to use you can only hip fire from it. The only way to detach attachments is finding another attachment similar to it and swapping out that attachment, or you accidentally attach a scope to your LMG because of the fast-paced nature of the game, or you accidentally bought it that you should have been able to take off and possibly give to your friend with an iron sight sniper rifle. I would buy weapons and for some reason a sniper scope would be on a damn shotgun? Why? Besides that, the gunplay, the feel of the guns, and how they hit Ridden is very satisfying and responsive. Gotta give major props to Turtle Rock for it. But if you're on controller, Turtle Rock really needs to tone down the aim sensitivity for controller users. Having my aim snap to a common Ridden 20 feet away from my sights when I'm trying to shoot a propane tank was a constant annoyance. Or if there was a common directly in front of me, I wouldn't aim at them, I would aim at a common that's nowhere near where I was aiming. And I can easily abuse this sensitivity by constantly tapping my aim button while spraying my weapon at a horde of commons and have the game easily take over and allow me to have bot aim. Or if there was something hard to hit like the Hocker, I would just keep spamming the aim button while firing an assault rifle and I could easily take him out. But hey, with all of this said and done, I know why a lot of people are here today and what a lot of people wanted out of the game. So let's get right to the verses. Swarm. So going in head first, if you know me or have seen any of my old content, you'll know I have spent an astronomically no-lifer amount of months of my life, yes, I said months, exclusively in Left 4 Dead's Versus mode. The dynamic shift of progressing through the regular campaigns as survivors against player-controlled infected and then swapping roles when one team reaches the safe room or dies. To coordinate as infected as you spawn in with the survivors progressing through each chapter, constantly making you change your strategy depending on your immediate environment and what lies ahead. Well, that is all basically non-existent minus a few key components, since the Versus mode for Back 4 Blood is now a hyper-focused, perk-based build, Fortnite circling version of Left 4 Dead's Versus Survival, now known as Swarm mode. Turtle Rock Studios has confirmed there are no plans in the near future to introduce a traditional campaign versus mode, to which many people was the goal and selling point to getting this game in the first place. Many comment sections and forums have voiced their thoughts and complaints, and one of the first things you'll see is disappointment in people backing out of Back 4 Blood over, again, Swarm mode being a beef beefed up Fortnite level up version of Left 4 Dead's Versus Survival. That's not what a lot of people were asking for. If you're a longtime fan of Left 4 Dead, you can understand that Versus Survival is one of the worst balanced mutations where survivors always go to the same spot and it gets really repetitive quickly compared to many other modes available. So for me and many others, that news was extremely disappointing to hear. But as to not be totally pessimistic, we can still dive into the mode, have some fun with it, and see what it has to offer. Now what is it? It's a round-based, best 2 out of 3 system where teams of 4 go against each other in a small map as it slowly shrinks from a battle royale circle. Being outside that circle canonically will have you eaten alive by insects and chipping away at your health like every popular battle royale these days. Which is a good thing. The circle is not the worst thing in the world, as it forces people to move out of their hidey holes, which was a problem with Versus Survival, as people would just stay in one location and make them stay on the move between each horde spawn as the game progresses. Each team will switch sides each round between Ridden and Cleaners, and whoever gets the best time will win that round. Switching maps each round with the Cleaners, picking out cards and scavenging for supplies at the start, while Ridden spend mutation points to beef up the specials and their abilities, as well as the commons, until a victor is determined. While this mode was fun for a short time, coming up with special Ridden combinations that worked well together, figuring out spots to fortify and bunker down in as Cleaners, and overall reaching those times was pretty damn entertaining. But it did feel underwhelming after back-to-back-to-back playthroughs and only had me wanting more from the game, and I hope there's more that the game's going to offer when the full release comes out. But I do have a question for you. What is the main appeal of Versus mode though? I know. Starting with the main appeal of a swarm mode being the Ridden, and they're all in third-person perspective this time around. However you feel about that, that's how it's going to be here. But there's stuff in practice that will just become repetitive staples that will get old fast for a major percent of the game-playing population. Since we're able to pick whatever special Ridden we want to be, it's going to make somewhat of a meta and competitive scene in the Versus gameplay, and for people that just want to casually play the game, that may be a problem. Now this is something Left 4 Dead excelled at. You play Versus, you deal with whatever special infected you were randomly given by the AI director, and you didn't have to worry about how to spec out the special infected for efficiency. They had their main power, a scratch, and whatever other bonuses came with them, like the boomer exploding on death or the charger not being able to be shoved by the survivors. But now, everyone going forward will have to, as a team, communicate with each other on which infected they're going to have to pick and how to spend their mutation points, as everyone spends them in a basically community team-wide upgrade system. It is gonna be meta competitive hell, with people complaining and bitching at each other in the same way people playing as Cleaners might do over cards, but now with the Ridden to a now more noticeable degree as they see what points have been invested in which powers for which special Ridden. But the mutation system does add some interesting aspects to each infected, even changing commons themselves, with the Ridden team being able to give the commons more health, speed, variations in what they can do, and even the ability to spew acid and explode if shot in the head or dying, and even being immune to fire. Think about this though, making bulkier common hordes that can drop pools of acid on death can be obnoxious for the fact that we have a very limited area for which the survivors can run around in, that these mutations, like the common infected dropping acid, aren't even the highest level to purchase, meaning most of the time these acid zombies will be popping up against you in pretty much every freaking game. Commons that constantly die and drop acid is going to be the pick, and it's going to be completely annoying and unfun to go against as you constantly see it. But besides the commons and how annoying they're going to be as people force them to be stronger, I do appreciate that there are 3 separate variants of each special Ridden, with the Stinger having the Hocker and Stalker, the Tall Boy having the Bruiser and Crusher, and the Reeker having the Exploder and Retch, having different capabilities and strong suits for different situations. Left 4 Dead 1 at launch only had the Smoker, Boomer, and Hunter, and there wasn't anything else to them except when you got to play the tank every once in a while. But this time we get some variation, which is really freaking cool. I do appreciate that they did this. Now the Hocker, acting as a sniper and hawking big loogies to pin survivors in webbing, being a small and annoying creature that can stay out of sight, pinning survivors repeatedly if it can land its shots in the right hands, being a great initiator for further attacks for people for special ridden like the Leaker to spew acid on them to really rack up damage, or to prevent a save by someone grabbed by a crusher. There's a lot you can do with the Hocker. Their webbing can also be used to push these webbed up survivors long distances, pinning them outside the circle. It's like a mobile hunter that could push people in certain direction, putting them in harm's way. Now, there is the variant, the Stinger, that throws claws at cleaners to chip damage at them from far away, and that's about it. But I mean, it can do a lot of damage if some people are low, so it's fun to play if you're getting that chip damage if people are pinned. But the both of them are also able to leap large distances in a very similar fashion to the Hunter, but this time around can cling to walls as they wish. These guys also have very tiny frames to shoot at that are very hard to hit, with a very similar look to Common Ridden. So spotting them on the fly and taking them out can be a bit difficult outside of their audio cues. Now the Retches being able to spew tons of acid, I'm not even understating it, they spit so much acid from super far away and can make for a great way to force survivors out of tight areas or tack on acid damage to any pinned survivor, much like Left 4 Dead 2 Spitter. The acid lasts on the ground 5 times longer than the Spitter, and you can lay out way more, spewing acid for what seems like 4 to 5 seconds, and this is really can be abused, especially if you have 2 Retches and the survivors are in a closed off area. Although I still have an issue with the visibility and sound cues of the acid itself. In a lot of situations and scenarios, the acid on the ground is still too dark to discern for cleaners to avoid and get out of. The only really noticeable thing is bubbles popping out of the ground, but those are really too dark in the first place. Again, like I said in the alpha video, make it like the Spitter acid and make it bright green, and while you are inside the acid as a cleaner, make it progressively louder to alert a player that their feet are being melted off. Make it as loud as when the survivors are breathing. That would be perfect. The Retch and its variants can also do a charging attack to close the distance between survivors, causing minimal damage and explode in the middle of the living to blow up and spread more acid. If you like that aspect of this special, the variation of the Reeker called the Exploder can fulfill that, performing like a suicide grunt from Halo, although it feels very lackluster and way more situational than its acid spewing counterpart. It does make for a good endgame thing though. If survivors are clustered up, he can run in, and there's not much you can really do if it rushes in, because if you destroy it and kill it, it's gonna pop. If it is allowed to do what it's meant to do and pop, you're pretty much guaranteed to take a lot of damage just for it getting near you, which in terms of balance in a game mode that forces you into corners, tight spaces, and open areas via a circle can feel a bit broken, as there really isn't any counterplay to an explosive character rushing from a rooftop above you and self-detonating in your face. You know, at least with the Boomer in Left 4 Dead, you could shove it away to prevent it from exploding all over you. But here, all I can say is, well, sucks to be you, because you're getting a face full of exploder guts no matter what. There's nothing you can do except try to run away, but there's common infected everywhere, it's gonna slow you down. There's nothing you can do here. So, on the note of special ridden you can't do much about in close quarters, Bruisers are definitely the most broken of the special ridden. Being able to meat wall tons of damage unless you chuck grenades or have everyone firing at them at once, its mutation abilities also allow it to have more health regen and total health in general, being a nightmare killing quickly for most players. Its basic melee attacks can launch survivors, basically pushing people into the circle or easily knock survivors farther than it really should. Its tantrum attack, where it bashes a room, has no real cooldown and can be easily abused indefinitely to survivors in tight rooms and in a map with tons of small buildings. It's bound to happen, but more noticeably, the Bruiser's tantrum attack hasn't been quite coded perfectly yet. As you can see here, its attack can clip through walls, meaning it can use its attack to hit survivors indefinitely if they are pushed against or fortify or corner a wall, leaving the Bruiser to barely be able to be harmed while survivors are pinballed around. The other playable variant of the tall boy, the Crusher, doesn't get this bashing attack, but it can run up and grab survivors, being a vertical flip of the Charger that slowly drains the health of a cleaner until they are killed by their teammates. Unless they're Evangelo, who can just break out of stuff like this. Honestly, Evangelo is really annoying in versus mode because his ability is to break out of the grasp of a special ridden once every 60 seconds. I don't like that as an ability. It's kind of unfair. Each of these specials have a weak point for cleaners to shoot, but due to the chaotic nature of this game, trying to hit the weak points of these specials may not be achievable for most people playing, meaning Ridden like the Bruisers will take so much more gunfire that it's really annoying as they rush in and cause damage that you can't prevent. Their weak spot is on a shoulder that they hide away from the survivors. I don't understand that gameplay mechanic. So Bruisers are just going to take so much damage. In Left 4 Dead, Special Infected could be avoided by proper movement, adequately timed shoves, and short bursts of focused gunfire. In the situations presented by Back 4 Blood, well, you better shoot through walls before their exploder drops from above because of this spawn, or carry a grenade to insta-kill a Bruiser. It's almost impossible not to take some kind of damage from each spawn of the infected. With Left 4 Dead, there was some kind of balance to what you could do and how survivors could easily stop it. But with Back 4 Blood, the special ridden feel impossible to stop from doing just about anything, and it's really annoying. Unless you go out in an open field, which spawning in open fields in certain maps feels really broken. I know they're gonna fix it, but there's just a lot of balancing issues that I'm not for in this mode. So because of certain Ridden's favorabilities and more, you'll probably end up like me, and you're only going to play like 2 out of 6 of these playable Ridden. But when certain situations do arise, I do end up switching sometimes, since it does make you think about what works best for each situation, and adds some verticality to your Ridden play that I enjoy, making each playthrough of Swarm mode in your first few hours entertaining as you get to pick what you want to play. Now, giving the players a choice in Ridden can be fun. I've always wanted to be able to just pick the Charger over and over again in Left 4 Dead, but I could see it leaving it with a bit of Overwatch syndrome in the long run, where it can be a detriment. Think about it like this: you're going to join a lobby and 2 out of 3 of the Reeker spots have been taken, so somebody else can't pick Reeker. So someone goes on voice chat saying, well, I main Reeker and I don't know how to play Bruiser, so you're going to have to switch or else I'm quitting. Believe me, for a lot of people there will be Ridden you never want to touch, you just suck with. For me, I didn't like playing Hocker or Stinger, so I mostly played only either a Bruiser or a Retch. But since only 2 infected from each category can be picked, sometimes players will be forced to pick another. And I can see this being a problem for random solo players joining into matches who didn't get the character they wanted. That can also be on the side for cleaners if they wanted to be Hoffman but somebody took it. So they get pissed off and do one of many things, either trying to team fire their team, or not playing the game correctly, just going off and fucking off on their own, or leaving the game in general, which leads me into my next point. Sadly, with the beta, custom lobbies of 8 friends playing versus against each other weren't there, so I hope they will be featured in the game's initial release. But man, online lobbies were rarely ever filled with 8 people for a 4v4 match. Most of the time, people would load in as a 2 to 3 man squad against a 4-man squad. Now, if someone doesn't join, leaves, or you don't have 4 people, you are screwed as a cleaner or even Ridden. If there are any empty spots in either team, there's no way for empty spots in a team to be filled up in a match in progress. There really needs to be an AI taking over for these open spots on both sides, because it's just really unbalanced if you have to deal with it that way. And we know bots exist, they're already in the campaign, so why not include them here? Which, yes, the bots are still very underwhelming and not performing like they should. Many people have had issues with them in both the alpha and beta, so I could see bots really being an issue in versus, and they really got to get that hammered out. But they've had some time to work on this, so it's we're stuck in a balance of they should have had this programmed in time versus they really need to get this refined, so let's not rush AI to screw up versus mode. Hopefully the game's official release will update the bots enough to where Turtle Rock will be comfortable with having AI take over in swarm mode, or else people leaving and shutting down the match will be a very annoying issue that will deter people from playing swarm mode anytime soon. Another annoyance for me was both the amount of downtime between gameplay and the scavenge round itself. Between each round is a long loading screen since it has to load a whole new map each and every time, 60 seconds of survivors picking cards, and then another 60 seconds of scavenging the map for supplies. That time frame of 60 seconds to scavenge the map and open up boxes hoping for good supplies, and then mad rushing to a spot for your team to bunker down kinda gets old really quick. Why have the survivors eat up their time with opening crates to see what's inside a short time frame on these maps? I prefer if many of these crates were closer together and already opened up to give survivors more to work with in such a short amount of time, with the only closed boxes being for the toolkits you find. I think that would be a bit more fair, especially since each round is on a different map, forcing a longer load time between matches, really stagnating stuff, and then finding boxes on every map while making each round different can be a bit of a pain in practice. One plus side is any equipment you had on hand in the last round as a cleaner will carry over, somewhat rewarding you for not wasting supplies in the previous round. For Ridden players, the scavenge time feels like it just drags on as you roam around as a ghost, wanting to spawn. You'll see survivors running around in one location and be like, okay, I'm gonna set up here, but there's still 50 seconds before anything starts up. So you're just sitting there running around after you spent your 50 mutation points at the start. It's just a lot of downtime with nothing really going on. In Left 4 Dead's campaign versus, the time the survivors spend in the safe room gives the special infected time to set up their attacks in a linear pathway with tons of variations depending on the chapter, so there is something the infected can be doing with that time that survivors are spending getting their supplies together. But for swarm mode, you're just sitting there spectating survivors as they look for supplies and wait for them to all go to a camping spot and hope one of them remains far enough away to spawn and attack them. You have about 2 minutes to invest your mutation points, but over time and really quickly, you only need about 20 seconds to throw stuff at these mutation things. It's much faster for Ridden to figure out their builds versus survivors, cleaners, who are dealt random cards each round. It just feels like there's a disparity there. And then the spawning for the Ridden acts exactly as it does in Left 4 Dead, having to be outside a cleaner's line of sight and to not be too close in proximity to them to spawn yourself in. The maps you can manage this in can make a big difference in how achievable that is, with most of these maps having 1 to 3 main buildings with tons of one-room structures and or wide open area, all closed off by a wall infected cannot get past. We have this grid system that makes it to where infected can't run past, leading to what would look and feel like viable spawn points like on top of CDC tents that look viable to drop in through are completely walled off from Ridden. Why? There should be a lot more areas for the Ridden to spawn at, especially in open areas where spawning is going to be a pain in the ass for people that learn this mode and just cheese spawns. These maps, despite a circle to force people out of their camping spots, eventually will usually have people taking up 1 to 2 generic spots every single time. There is going to be a strategy of just 3 to 4 spots over time that people can just go to and then maneuver to, making much less variety in how cleaners go about each round, like I'm sure the developers intended, and making replayability dwindle over time. Because if we have survivors that can figure out spawns in this small amount of area versus Left 4 Dead, where it's much harder to figure out where people are going to spawn as you progress through a level, people that are just getting into the mode are going to get pissed off, say, this is broken, these people are too hard to go against, I don't like this, I'm quitting. And then you're screwing over your team, and it's just not fun. What's the point if it's not fun? I don't like how Versus is turning out in this small condensed area, especially with this small area being closed in on by the Fortnite Circle. You know, the Circle works really well for Battle Royale maps, but when it comes down to something this small, it can be really annoying. And I don't like the idea that the Fortnite Circle closes differently for both sides. On a map like the school, where survivors can stand out in the open parking lot to prevent spawns for the Ridden team, and then on our turn as cleaners, the Circle will end near a bunch of buildings for Ridden to spawn easily and wipe us out without much effort. Make circles play the exact same way for both teams, because it doesn't make sense to have a circle end in a closed off area for one team and then ending in an open area and making spawns harder for another, or else it is a complete imbalance for a time-based competitive mode. On top of that, after the 5-minute mark, this tiny ass circle where survivors can barely maneuver in can be really exploited by every infected, because 5 out of 6 infected have some way of heavily pushing survivors long distances. The Bruiser can bash in a radius guaranteeing damage or knock somebody out, and a freaking Retch that spews acid in large areas means you cannot do anything about acid on the ground and you're guaranteed to take damage no matter what. It's just a little bit too chaotic for chaotic's sake. And I get it, at the 5-minute mark, you really have to ramp up the odds against the cleaners to make versus rounds take less longer, but man, is it just annoying, especially when you can pick whatever Ridden you want. It can just be heavily abused. When most of the maps either have a wide open area, 2 to 3 buildings for people to camp in, and not really much else when it comes to options and how to fight back. So to close things off, coming in after the alpha, there have been many great improvements from the supplies, the card system, the copper system, variety and stuff you do through the campaign, so each chapter feels different and better for replayability. The hub world is a fine addition, but I feel like more should be going on to be a more engaging place to explore. But being able to test weapons out and fuck around with friends is better than just sitting in a lobby. The cleaners and their builds can make for a fun time of coming up with builds that work for a fun experience, and having pre-built decks help people that just want to hop in a match without studying each card thoroughly. But for people that don't obsess over cards, you really get these really crappy pre-built decks that punish people that just want to come in and play for a few minutes and have fun. I don't like that people that want a casual experience are going to be punished. Builds are going to bring a competitive meta type crowd that will make randomly joining matches a pain months and years down the road, as more diehard fans will remain with this game, and making anybody else that joins in really feel alienated about picking the right cards and deck, or else they're going to get kicked by tryhard teammates, or they're going to leave from frustration over people yelling at them, or just not feeling like they're doing enough in the game. But my biggest grievance is, of course, Swarm mode. The mutation point system is fun to mess around with and figure out what clicks, but eventually it will just boil down to picking the same exact thing every game until new special infected come out, starting out having fun and then starting over all the process of what works and what you shouldn't pick. The fact that lobbies do not autofill empty spots right now with other players or bots really irked me, because most of the time I had a team of 4, we'd see a team of 2 to 3, we would just mop the floor with them, somebody else would quit, and it just wasn't fun to go against someone even though we had a full squad. But the bottom line, it was fun. Fun if you can learn how to win. My friends and I only ever lost like 1 or 2 rounds in the 30+ rounds we played over the beta. Probably because we played so much Left 4 Dead Versus, our brains are just wired to most effectively play a mode like this. So I can't speak for newbies and people just getting in, for people who haven't touched Left 4 Dead in years, but I'm just saying this to have a more open perspective as people come in. As time goes on, with more cards behind battle passes, more competitive play that will become the norm, as new players looking to just play the game for fun are again gonna feel alienated, since they will just want to go in, boot up without knowing all the cards, and then building a perfect deck, knowing skill trees, specific locations to camp, speccing perfectly for Ridden, and so much more. There's just so much to really balance out right before even starting a match that can be a headache for a lot of people. It's fun to really see what clicks, but honestly, over time, a lot of people are just not going to be about that. Compared to Left 4 Dead in its campaign and versus mode, Left 4 Dead is deceitfully simple in its gameplay, being complex but easy to figure out over time. But Back 4 Blood is going to be overwhelming. It's a big reason something like Battleborn, with all of its skill trees and all the stuff you could do to level up your character and power him up, was overlapped and overshadowed by Overwatch, where people could just boot up the game, pick a character, not having to worry about anything except what the character can do, and play the game to relax and have fun, even though there's a meta nightmare with that too, believe me, I know. But with all the good and bad, how much fun can it be? The fact of the matter is people will still want a campaign versus like experience, and that's what people are clamoring for. A round and wave-based mode in condensed maps will feel short and repetitive over time, with there being only a difference in cleaner deck builds until new Ridden are released. I'm all for this mode, I really like it, but we really need another versus type mode coming out down the road. Back 4 Blood and its competitive and build-based elements are what separate it the most from its inspiration. But replayability and longevity are points I cannot exacerbate enough, and these aspects are what this game needs to stand up in the shadow of its predecessor, Left 4 Dead. That wraps up this review of the Back 4 Blood beta. A long one, no doubt, but I wanted to be as thorough as possible. Is there something I got wrong? Do you agree with my points? Is something outdated? What did you like or dislike about the beta? To people saying I'm just bitching and I'm just overthinking stuff, that's technically what I do for my job. It's my opinion and what I dislike and liked about it. If you didn't care for it, I mean, just click off the video. You can still buy the game or get a refund. I'm not telling you what to do either way. That's your choice. Do what you want. At the end of the day, I want this game to be replayable and succeed for months and years to come. That is my bottom line judgment. If you agree with me in wanting this game to succeed, follow me on Twitter and join me in wishing Turtle Rock Studios and Back 4 Blood in making the best game they can possibly do, and encourage them by telling them they're doing a great job so far.
I think we did a pretty good job so far.
Thanks to Wisefish for putting this video together for me. He's a cool guy, check out his channel, and a big old thanks to my buddy Cake Slayer for helping me touch up this script and sharing his footage. Subscribe to him for Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood, and food content. I'm tired, as you can tell my voice is starting to go out. I've been typing this for hours and I've been recording for over 2 hours, and my vacation was canceled because of certain reasons. So why not perk up your boy and get his voice better by liking the video, and if you haven't already, subscribing, and maybe head to my Patreon to be a supporter, or being a YouTube channel member, or subscribing to my Twitch. A lot of shilling out there, but you can be on this really cool list here. Look at all those cool people. I couldn't thank them enough, and I can't thank you enough for watching this video all the way through, because I am an opinionated asshole who cannot stop complaining about a video game that makes no difference at the end of the day. But whatever, I love Back 4 Blood and I want it to do good. Until next time, I'm Zackass, aka Wow Such Gammon. Stay wow for more.